Hey friends, welcome to another episode of the She Doesn't Settle podcast. I'm your host, Kelly Travis. Thank you so much for being with me today. We have a good topic today. I'm excited about it. And I could have used this information years ago. So, given that so many people are struggling with chronic stress and burnout and high levels of anxiety, I felt like this was an important topic to cover and to discuss. So, today we're talking all about whether or not exercise is beneficial when you're already experiencing chronic stress and high anxiety. And if so, what types of exercise is best? For many people, and I know for a lot of my listeners, after a long, stressful day or before a long, stressful day, exercise feels like a gift, right? When you're overworked or have high anxiety about a decision you have to make, or there's a lot going on, it can be therapeutic to break a sweat, whether during a long run or a weightlifting session or a HIIT class, whatever the case may be, right? My running friends and I joke, well, not joke, we talk very seriously about how running is therapy for us in a lot of ways. And when we can't run, like I wasn't able to for a while because of an injury, it really messes with us. So we know that exercise has a lot of benefits. Now, the latest science shows that intense workouts can actually be causing a different kind of stress, a physical kind. And so today, we'll hopefully help you figure out whether you should rethink your workout routine or if you can keep on doing what you enjoy. So, there are three hormones that play a role in stress. And when we think about stress, it might feel really negative, right? But without it, if we think way back when, we probably wouldn't have been able to survive as a species for very long. And we know now that the reason that our brain still exists in this fight, flight, or freeze is from those times, right? When we're faced with a dangerous situation, our sympathetic nervous system goes into action and triggers that fight or flight reaction, which helps us handle the trigger and get through it alive. Sometimes our brain responds to an email from somebody that is maybe nasty as a threat, right? So we may not have animals that we're trying to run from. Now our threats are different, but they still exist. And the way that we handle this stress is with the help of three different hormones: adrenaline, norepinephrine, and cortisol. So I'm going to talk specifically about cortisol today because that's really what is tied into this exercise conversation. Cortisol is one of the most interesting when it comes to our modern day stressors. So most of us, again, are no longer running away from predators on a daily basis. Instead, our stress tends to be chronic, long term, and stems from nagging issues like work pressure, juggling a family, finance stress, like those types of things, right? Not having boundaries. And this can lead to stress levels that always seem to be high and cortisol levels that are always spiking. The way that our cortisol levels are supposed to work is that when we wake up in the morning, they're the highest. And then throughout the day, they slowly decline until when it's time to go to bed, they're at their lowest and we're ready for bed. These days, a lot of people have some effed up lines of cortisol, myself included, where maybe the lowest is in the morning and it goes the opposite and you're like wired at night, or maybe you have a spike in cortisol midday. Like it depends on who you are, right? Unfortunately, when your cortisol levels are too high for too long, it can impact both your physical goals, like breaking down muscle tissue, promoting like abdominal fat. It can also lead to a host of other issues like poor sleep, brain fog, major fatigue, depression. And this can lead to even greater problems, health problems, like weight gain and heart disease if it's left unchecked. So when it comes to normalizing our out of control stress hormones, consistent exercise is definitely one of the best medicines available. That regular physical activity can help lower your stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. It can even cause you to release those feel-good brain chemicals like serotonin to give you a mood boost, runner's high, or dopamine, right? And then in addition to that, exercise, especially when paired with other positive things like sleep or a good diet, can help you get to a healthier place, which even further regulates those stress hormones. Exercise is also a good idea if you have low cortisol levels. So there's evidence that people with PTSD, which is a demographic with low baseline cortisol levels, can benefit from regular aerobic activity as well. But when we're talking about exercise that is appropriate for this, we're talking about like moderate activity. So walking, the elliptical, swimming, hiking, yoga, weightlifting. Those are the exercises that are appropriate. They don't cause too much additional stress on the body. They're lower, they're just better in terms of being able to improve those feelings of well-being while also not adding to the stress you already have. Okay. Now, a lot of you are probably like, okay, but intensity is what makes me feel better and I need it. But here's the thing. So many people are resorting to exercise, which, listen, is way better than resorting to a lot of other habits that are in some ways worse for us, right? But overtraining or doing too much when you're already burnt out and stressed can have the exact opposite effect, and we don't realize it, right? And so we're just compounding the issue. If you already have high levels of cortisol, you're super anxious, you're not sleeping well, and then you get up after not sleeping well and you go and do an endurance exercise or a high intensity workout, that's just going to further deplete you, and it's not going to be helpful physically or mentally. So I know a lot of you listeners are very active and take that part of your health very seriously. Like me, it's a big part of who you are. We have to pay attention. We have to listen. And I have been guilty of this until I figured out that it was actually wrecking me. When I first became a single mom, so many years ago, how many? 7 years ago, my oldest was barely 3. My youngest was a year and a half. Yeah. Yes. It was a lot. I had just started my business. I was juggling them all week, every week. They were still in diapers. It was a lot. I was not sleeping very much because I did a lot of my work at night to build my business. So you can imagine, like many of you, I was really burnt out and I was struggling. And I still was getting up every morning and doing a workout, whether it was intensity in the gym or a long run or something like that. And I finally had tests done and a cortisol specific test and realized stuff was not the way it was supposed to be. And so we addressed it. And in addition to taking some supplements that helped with that stress, I had to change some habits. And I had to realize or come to terms with the fact that doing both things at the same time, in terms of like still having high levels of cortisol and then beating my body up, because that's what you do, right? That's another form of stress that your body responds to, was not helping me, right? And so I just share this because I know we get focused on doing these things, and if we have the habit, we don't want to break it because it has served its purpose for a long time, but there are other things you can do, right? So let's talk about those other things, because that's important to know. The exercises that we want to avoid when we're stressed, right? Because moderate exercise is a great idea for helping you manage your stress hormones. The evidence around high intensity workouts shows that it can trigger surges in your cortisol levels when compared to moderate exercise. So certain workouts are specifically designed to push you to your limits and are very physically stressful, which then can trigger your stress hormones in the same way mental stressors do, right? Your body steps into that fight, flight, freeze. Because again, it just recognizes it as stress. The one thing to point out is that this increase in the cortisol levels is temporary with exercise, right? And it will return to baseline after the workout is completed. But there's also not a ton of evidence in terms of if you should avoid this exercise completely, if you're healthy, blah, 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 all this stuff. We know regular physical exercise, moderate, is recommended, very good for a healthy lifestyle, managing stress, overall health and well-being, right? Some researchers are very concerned about the overtraining, chronic overtraining, or not giving yourself enough time to rest and recover between intense exercise, right? So kind of what I was talking about. There's that recovery period that's super important, and without it, it's going to affect your adrenals, and that impacts your production of your stress hormones. So intense exercises aren't necessarily a problem on their own, but if you're overdoing it and doing it too much, which I know many people do, or if you've got high levels of stress, chronic stress and anxiety, those two things are when it's time to kind of pay attention and evaluate if it's helpful. So the exercises that are considered high intensity and could cause these spikes in cortisol are high intensity interval training. This is obviously very popular exercise for people, especially if you're short on time, and you're looking to get as much out of a workout as possible. And these workouts are designed to get your heart rate up really fast, to the max, right? Which is physically stressful. And you're gonna get a big cortisol spike. So high intensity workouts, CrossFit, boot camp style training, interval type work, those types of things kind of fall into this category. And then we have endurance training, which is where my stuff falls into. Long periods of time working out, right? We see this with long distance running, marathoners, cyclists, any type of endurance sport, ultra runners, is going to contribute to that already elevated stress. And anything that lasts over 60 minutes is kind of falling into this category. And then the other thing that the study showed was combat sports. So this is like karate, jujitsu, what else? Wrestling, sumo, judo. And they found that they saw increased levels of cortisol, adrenaline, and testosterone in these. So very interesting information. Okay, so what do we do if this is happening? Well, first, we probably want to, get into that moderate exercise instead of doing the high intensity. Or if you're going to do it, make sure you have several days in between to rest, recover, bring some of that stress down, right? But then also, like, what are we doing to help our cortisol levels, right? This is definitely something that if you're concerned about or you think maybe could be an issue for you, getting a test done. Your doctor can have you do the test. It's going to show you your cortisol levels throughout the day and how it's impacting your hormones. So definitely, if you're concerned, check that out and do that work to see if that's an issue. The other thing that I became familiar with and I have been using for quite a few years is an app with a heart rate strap that measures your heart rate variability. And that information can help you decide what you should do that day, which is really helpful. So a lot of wearables have HRV built in. Research tells us that those aren't altogether accurate, though can be good information. When you use the heart rate strap with the app, much more accurate, and it gives you real-time information. So the best time to do it is right when you wake up, and it's going to measure the variation in between each heartbeat, which is controlled by your nervous system, the autonomic nervous system. I can talk. So it works behind the scenes, and it's measuring like heart rate, blood pressure, breathing, all of these things that contribute. So really important information. And what it does is it tells you if it's high or if it's low and base or in the middle, which is where you want to be, like in a good place, so that you can make decisions on, do I need to take it easy today? Can I go hard? The app I use gives you that information. Like it'll tell you, hey, you're great. You're at a 10, like go out and kill it today, right? Or if it's low, if you're in the parasympathetic or the sympathetic range, it's going to say, do some deep breathing exercises, moderate exercise, or, pay attention because your immune system could be, low and you might be getting sick. So really good information. A lot of things impact it, like sleep, if you're excited, all of this stuff. But I'll drop a link in the app that I use, as well as a download that I have that has all my favorite wellness apps that you can check out. Okay, so that's one thing. Number two is doing things to practice what we call mindfulness, right? So we've got a lot of stuff going on. It's really important when we have or are under a lot of chronic stress, high anxiety. Breath work is number one and most important. For me, I'm not good at meditation, but breath work is key. Andrew Huberman talks about, I can't remember what he calls it. It is my favorite breathing technique. It's where you inhale one big gulp of air and then you top it off, like get rid of the rest of it, and then you exhale all of it. And you just do it as many times as you can. I'll drop a link to that in the show notes as well. Meditation, just practicing being in the moment, journaling, those types of things. And then number 3 is prioritizing your sleep, right? Under normal circumstances, your body releases its highest levels of cortisol early in the morning, like I said, to trigger the start of your day, and then bottoms out at the time you're supposed to go to bed. When you have disruptive sleep cycles, this can mess with your normal cycle. So sticking to that regular bedtime, avoiding screen time hours leading up to sleep. First thing in the morning when you wake up, getting some sun, a natural sun, same thing at the end of the day. Those things are super helpful and just kind of bringing down the chronic stress, alleviating some anxiety, and helping with those cortisol levels. So we know exercise, natural de-stressor, but we have to pay attention to if we're overdoing it when we're stressed, or doing too much intensity, because it could potentially backfire. So we want to leave exercise feeling energized, clear, ready to take on the day. So listen to your body and pay attention to what you need right now so that you can start to feel better and feel your best. Thank you so much for being with me today. I hope you got something from this. Make sure you check out those links in the show notes. And I will see you next week. Peace out.